Well, hello and welcome back to Dan's Fish. I'm Dan, surprise, surprise. And today I want to talk about treating fish. When I first get fish in, how do I go about treating them, getting them back to health, getting them acclimated to aquarium life, and happy with living here in these tanks. Hang on, I'm going to adjust this a little bit. There, I think that's a little better. So, the first thing is, I've got a bunch of different medicines here. Here, I'll show you a little teaser that I'm going to be talking about. Lots of different things I use, but I want to talk first about why I use them. When fish come in, they generally come in from either the wild, or if they're being imported in, they come from another part of the world. Bottom line is that just like when you and I travel, if you're a fish and you're put in a bag and put in a box and sent off, it's a pretty stressful time. So, it's like when I get on an airplane, I might be going on a vacation to relax, but the travel itself, getting on the plane, getting through security, all that stuff, that's just stressful, even in the best conditions. So, the fish have come through a pretty stressful situation. And if they're coming from the wild, they're arriving in a situation in this glass aquarium, which is completely different to them. And so adjusting to that might take a little time. And if they're coming from a breeder, say, in Southeast Asia or something like that, then they're still coming to a very different environment than they're used to. And even if they're coming from a breeder here local in the United States, they're still going through, pardon me, the stress of being packed and shipped and all that stuff. So even in the best case scenario, just like when you and I travel, the fish are going to be stressed out. So the first thing we want to do is help them recover from that stress. Now when fish get stressed, a couple things can happen. One common thing is that any kind of parasite they might have had, or pathogen they might have had, that they've been fine with. It's allergies, guys. Here in Sheridan, we have all these massive cottonwood trees, and they are beautiful. But if you go outside right now, it looks like it's snowing. We call it summer snow, because the air is just full of the cotton that these cottonwood trees release, and there's just pollen everywhere. And so I apologize. My allergies hate this time of year, and this is an especially bad year for it. And so I'm periodically gonna cough on you. Sorry, not much I can do about it. So anyway. The fish are stressed, and one thing is like ick. Ick is this very, very common parasite, and I read all the time on forums, and I see messages in groups on Facebook and things about people saying, I bought this fish from this store, and it gave me ick, and I'll never go back. And the truth is that fish always pretty much have ick. They just have it in a balanced ratio. They're healthy, their immune system is keeping it in check, but it's there. It's in the tank, it's with the fish. But it's such a minute amount that it doesn't affect the fish. The fish, you can't really see it, the fish is healthy and going about its life. But the moment you take that fish and you put it in a new home, or you package it up and send it, and its body goes through the stress of that, then that compromises the immune system. And so something that, like ick, that the fish has had all along and always will have, you're not going to eradicate it completely, will manifest in large numbers, and suddenly we're like, oh no, there's ick. But the truth is, just like human beings, fish have a vast array of organisms that live in them, live on them, in a balance. And it's these stressful situations that allow that balance to go out of whack. And so that's when we'll often notice fish showing symptoms. And so fish are always going to be carrying ick. Unless you're in a lab in a biosecure facility or something like that, I don't know if I can guarantee you, but the odds are good that every fish that we have actually has a tiny bit of ick or some other pathogen or parasite in its system, something that we would consider undesirable. And going through stressful situations is the trigger for the outbreak. So if you get a fish and it appears totally healthy and you take it home and then a little while later you've got ick, it's not necessarily that the pet store did a bad job or anything like that. It's that the fish went through a stressful situation and now we've got to take care of the fish and help it recover from that stressful situation. So there's a few ways we can do that. Before we talk about medicines, which I will in a moment, I want to talk about some other things. Number one is clean water. If a fish is in nature, they're generally in a pretty large body of water, and often in a body of moving water, say a river or a stream, if it's not a lake or a pond or something. And in that environment, the ratio of parasite or pathogen per fish per volume of water is quite low. So the odds of fish constantly coming in contact with them frequently and getting an infection to the amount that they show symptoms and start to become ill is fairly low. The moment we take a fish and put it in our aquarium, we're putting it in a much more confined body of water, and therefore if there are parasites and things like that, they build up in concentration really rapidly. So one thing that we can do to prevent fish from becoming sick is keep the water really clean, especially the first few weeks after fish arrive. This is part of the reason why I change 50% of the water twice a day on discus, but even on other fish, even on like a platy or a tetra, 50% at least once a day, at least for the first couple of weeks, the week or two. Yeah, usually a couple weeks that I have them. And that's so that if there is a pathogen that they came in with, and their immune system is somewhat compromised because of stress, then I'm constantly flushing some of that out of the aquarium so that the concentration of the parasite or the pathogen or whatever it is doesn't build to the point where the fish is going to get ill no matter what we do. So that's one thing. Another thing is making the environment as stress-free as possible so that the fish is, because remember, stress is what's causing a lot of this, so to manifest itself anyway. So what we need to do is give the fish as stress-free an environment as possible. So that has to do with all kinds of things. That's proper temperature, that's proper tank mates, that they aren't getting chased and harassed constantly. That's filling the basic needs of the fish so that it can feel secure. And every fish, there's so many different fish with so many different needs that I can't go into all the detail right now. That would be never ending. But the point is to research the fish before you get it, know what they need, what's the right temperature, what kind of diet do they prefer, what's their behavior like, are they shy, is any other fish going to outcompete them for food or pick on them constantly? Do they have flowing fins that other fish will pick on, or are they going to be able to hold their own and not have a problem? All that is really important. So frequent water changes to just physically flush out the amount of disease-causing organisms that are present in the water, and then a stress-free environment, proper temperatures, proper conditions. Now, I'm not advocating that you make the water perfect parameter-wise. I'm not advocating that if it's an African cichlid and you have somewhat softer water than African cichlids like, you're constantly trying to raise the pH. Or if you have a discus, for example, and you have hard water, that you're constantly trying to lower the pH. That creates instability in swings of pH and things like that. So what's important, I mean, that would be ideal if you could create if you could create the ideal conditions for them and maintain them at a constant, that would be fine. But what we don't want to do is keep having it swing up, swing down, swing up, swing down, hardness or pH or any of these parameters, temperature. So keep it stable and keep it as stress-free as possible and keep it clean. Another thing is food. A lot of times when you first get a fish in, it's not going to want to eat in front of you, and it might not want to eat in bright lights. So something I can do in this room, let me show you real quick. I can turn off all the lights over the tank so the fish aren't getting direct light, and that helps them want to eat. I can do the opposite too. I can have just light on over the tanks. That way they don't maybe see me as much as I'm working in the fish room, so I'm not as scary. Oh, and I'll show you this. This is important too. Even when all the lights go off for the night, there's still a small night light on in this room so that they can find a secure place overnight to sleep. Okay, just a minute. Let me get this all back to normal. So that way, anyway, bright light is probably not a good idea for a brand new fish in a brand new system. So give them some food and then leave them alone. Give them some time to come out and eat it. Maybe turn off the light. After a while, they'll get used to coming out. They'll get used to the environment. They'll get used to eating, and then you can watch them all you want. But until that happens, maybe leave them alone to keep the stress down and give them an opportunity to get the proper nutrition. So there's lots you can learn about proper nutrition, but that's important too to preventing disease. So anyway, let's get to some medicines and procedures. So fish come in, I temp them, I float them in the bag or leave them in the room until they're about the same temperature as the water, and then I put them right in the tank. I don't do drip acclimation or anything like that. And then when that's done, I medicate them, and I'll show you kind of what I do. There's several medicines I use. Some are antibacterial, and some are anti-parasitic. Well, they're parasite medicines. Anti-parasitic, maybe that's right. I don't know the term exactly. So the one that I find super useful is Metronidazole. In fish forums and things like that, you'll often hear it referred to as Metro. But when someone says Metro, and they're talking about fish medicine, they're probably talking about this, Metronidazole. And it's a great medicine for parasites. It does have antibacterial properties as well, and I find that I can use it safely with lots of other medicines. In fact, there are medicines sold on the market, such as, where'd I put it? General Cure, which has a mix of both metronidazole and praziquantel in it, and you can use both of those together. The other thing is that metronidazole works in conjunction with some antibacterial medicines, and I haven't had any issues with that. One antibacterial medicine that I use frequently is oxytetracycline. This is a lot of oxytetracycline, and I like that. I also like this one, erythromycin. Ick, an old favorite. This is praziquantel, anti-parasite medicine. And then this one, I don't have the original packaging, but this is levamisole, which is pretty useful. So, fish come in. If they're from the wild, they definitely have parasites. If they've been brought in from out of the country, they definitely have parasites. Unless they were bred by a hobbyist, and you know the fish room and you see them all the time, and unless it's that kind of situation, and they're captive bred and they've been raised several generations, then the odds are that they have parasites, and especially internal parasites. Even if they're captive bred in your friend's fish room, they probably at some point have picked up some things. Now, what usually happens in the industry is a company will bring in a whole bunch of fish from overseas, whether they're wild or farmed, sometimes from Florida. There's plenty of fish farms in Florida. And then they'll take those, they'll sit in their tank for about a week or a few days, and they'll sell them to the pet stores. And so this fish has been caught, bagged, shipped to the transshipper in the United States, then sent to the wholesaler in the United States, where it's sat in a bear tank for a few days, sometimes a couple weeks. The wholesalers usually try to sell all the fish within a few days, within a week, and it is transported again to the pet store, where it goes into a tank. So by the time it gets to the pet store, it's been through quite a few transfers. And each time it's been transferred, it's gone without food for a while, and it's pretty stressed. Now, unfortunately, most pet stores don't maybe have the resources or the know-how, or for some other reason just don't medicate the fish when they get them. And so you will often get a fish that has been through all that and hasn't been treated. So when I get the fish, that's my approach. It's been through a stressful time, and it needs to be treated. I want to treat it before I send it to my customer. I don't want the customer getting it and then seeing tapeworms, or the fish getting really skinny, or as much as possible not have an outbreak of ick or velvet, even though honestly you're never going to eradicate things completely. So because the fish has been through so many transfers, it's likely that it's maybe been slightly injured. Maybe a fin has got caught in a net, or maybe it's got a little bit of ammonia burn, or maybe it got bumped or jostled or something, and a scale got damaged, things like that. So there's all these little maybe micro injuries that a fish will come in with, and that's why we use these antibiotics. This one, erythromycin, is the other one that people frequently use. They're good general antibiotics. They're not really harsh. They're fairly inexpensive, and they help for all these little micro injuries to not get infected. So you're trying to help the fish to not get an infection. That's why we use these when the fish arrive. The second reason is when we treat for parasites, internal and external parasites. When the parasites die, say you have ick on your skin. Well, actually, ick is killed in the free swimming stage, not in that stage. But when the parasites are killed, say you have a tapeworm in your intestine, it's killed. That tapeworm's mouth was latched on to the inside of the digestive tract. When it dies, it unlatches and comes off. So there's little injuries in the intestine where the teeth of this parasite were dug in. So when parasites die, they leave behind all these little micro injuries as well. So when you treat for parasites, it's often a good idea to also simultaneously treat with an antibiotic. So that's what we do. The fish come in, they go into a tank, the lights go down to a dim level, and they are treated usually with metronidazole, sometimes with general cure as well, and then also an antibiotic, either oxytetracycline or erythromycin. So we do that for say 3 or 4 days. Then usually the fish is looking a lot better. Usually by then, if it has internal tapeworms and things, usually they've been expelled. Now its digestive tract is freer, so it can actually digest the food and even swallow the food. Sometimes you'll get new fish and you'll notice they'll try to eat and they can't swallow the food. Often that's a kind of parasite that's preventing that from happening. It can also be bacterial infection that's kind of swelling things so food doesn't get through. So in a few days they'll look better. The issue is that these parasites have lots of different life stages, and depending on where they're at in the life stage, they can be killed by the medicine. Ick, for example, is in a stage where it's a little, I'll call it an egg, maybe a cyst. I'm not sure what the exact correct term is, but let's call it an egg, a tiny little egg. And then that hatches, and the ick becomes free swimming, where it swims through the water and searches for a fish, and then it finds the fish and latches onto the fish and matures to reproduce and lay more eggs. It can only be killed in the free swimming stage. So if you use the treatment for a while, you'll kill all the free swimming ick, and you won't see any more ick on the parents. Oh, I'm not doing this right. You won't see the parents, the adult ick. You won't see the white spots on the fish anymore, and you'll think you're done. But the truth is, there's a whole bunch of eggs down there. You'll stop treatment, and then the eggs will hatch, and you could get a reinfestation, because they only die in the free swimming stage, typically with the medicines we use. And that kind of scenario is true with lots of different parasites. So you treat for 3 or 4 days, and then what I do is I like to, unless there's active ick and I know I need to treat for at least 7 days or so. The Ick Life Cycle is typically 10 to 14 days. So if you really want to eradicate it, you have to treat constantly for 10 to 14 days, and you'll still not probably get it all. But anyway, treat 3 or 4 days. Then, because these medicines are a little hard on the fish, they are metabolized by their kidneys and or their liver. I want to give those organs a little break. So I'll lay off for a day or two, and then I'll treat them with a different medicine. Usually I start with Metronidazole, and then the second time I give them 2 days of this levamisole, which treats a different class of organisms. And I've actually had it where I've treated for a week solid with Metronidazole, the fish expelled a bunch of internal parasites, seemed clear, then I'll switch to the levamisole and I'll expel a bunch more parasites that were not killed off by the Metronidazole. So I use both. So I do that, and then I'll often, depending on the source of the fish, sometimes they're done at that point, and I feel like they're good to go. But sometimes I'll give them a week off or so, and then I'll hit them up again with another round of medicine, just depending on if they actively expelled parasites when I first treated them or not. If they did, I'll hit them with another round. So you kind of have to do that because of the different life cycles of the parasite and when you can actually treat them, kill them off at. So that's kind of the strategy. Give the fishes is the least stressful environment possible. Keep them, the parameters as constant and as correct as possible. pH and hardness and alkalinity and all that is better constant than completely correct. Okay, and then treat for parasites while simultaneously treating with an antibiotic. Then I give them a little rest, hit them with a different parasite medicine, and then depending on what I saw happen while I was treating that first week, I may give them another round. And that's worked really well for me. Every now and then I run into something that I just can't seem to get rid of. I'm not a veterinarian by any means, and I don't have the expertise to identify everything. But in general, if I follow these procedures, I can usually get the fish clean within a week or two, and it's worked well for me. Now, I do use Prozi sometimes, but Prozi's a little tricky. If you use General Cure, it's very soluble. It's easy to mix into the water. But if you use just Prozi, it's not very water soluble. So a trick to help it be water soluble is you can actually mix it with a tiny little bit of vodka. Just enough that it turns into like a dough, almost. And somehow there's a reaction with the vodka that makes it more water soluble. So you can take your Prozi, you mix it with a little bit of vodka, and then you put that into a little container of water and mix it in really well until it's dispersed throughout the water, and then you can add it to your tank. And the vodka is just such a tiny little bit that it doesn't harm the fish or anything like that. But that's one trick. Now, Prazi is pretty expensive, so I tend to favor metronidazole and levamisole. Erythromycin is a little pricey, so I tend to favor oxytetracycline. And usually that works for me. But I do have the Prazi and I do have the erythromycin on hand just in case I need them. But for treating little micro injuries and keeping the typical things that could affect the fish during shipping, I found Metro, levamisole, and along with oxytetracycline to be just fine. I should mention though, oxytetracycline with metronidazole has not been a problem for me, but I've never tried oxy and levamisole together. I don't know what would happen. It would probably be fine, but that is one I haven't done. I typically start with the metronidazole in conjunction with the oxytetracycline or erythromycin, and then after 4 days, then I lay off for a bit and then do a round of levamisole, but without an antibiotic. Just because I don't know what would happen if I did that. I haven't been able to find any literature that makes me confident that that would be okay, and I haven't yet just tested it to see if it would be okay. So just as a word of warning. Anyway, that's how I treat the fish. It works well for me generally, and every now and then though I find something I don't know what it is and I have to send a couple fish off to a veterinarian to say, hey, could you figure this out? I need help with this. That can be expensive, but I think it's worthwhile to do. Anyway, hope that was helpful. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. And if you haven't subscribed and you like this kind of thing, it would help me out if you did. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you next time. Something that I should also mention is ick. If it's actual ick, which looks almost like little tiny bits of salt sprinkled all over the fish, as opposed to something that I'm going to call stress ick, which is like a little white pimple deeply embedded in the fish and is only in a few spots on the body and not like evenly distributed. If it's the first thing, then this stuff will work pretty well. But so will, if you can find it, Quick Cure. I forget, they got bought out and a different company changed the name, and I don't remember what it is. But Quick Cure has always worked pretty well for me too. I don't generally treat with a specific ick medicine unless I actually see the ick. I found that the metronidazole and the levamisole, the way I do things, tend to take care of that. Now, if there is an obvious ick infection, or infestation, I should say, then yeah, then I'll go ahead and use ick medicine and treat that. And I can do that with the metronidazole and the oxytetracycline without any problem. And so I think that that's important to mention.